Sudan's ruling military council and opposition coalition agree on transitional government. 9 Boko Haram militants killed in 3 separate onslaughts in Nigeria. And more Ebola cases reported in DRC's Goma city as outbreak marks 1 year. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. Foreigners begin betting on enterprises in Ethiopia. And Year of Return seeks to encourage diaspora Ghanaians back home. Let's begin with some news coming out of Sudan. The ruling Transitional Military Council and the opposition coalition have agreed on a document which will usher in a period of transitional government. According to the Africa Union's main mediator, the deal outlines the powers and branches of the new structure. Here's CGTN's Michael Karanja with the latest.
A deal has been reached, one that might see the end of tensions in the North African state. Tensions that have sometimes exploded into bloody confrontation, leading to deaths of demonstrators and setting off more and more protests.
I am very happy, in the name of the African mediation and in the name of the 2 negotiating parties, to announce to the Sudanese public, the national, international and African public, that the 2 delegations have completely agreed on a constitutional declaration.
According to the parties, the newly signed document sets the stage for yet another round of talks, which will focus on the technicalities of forming the structures of the new government.
There has been extensive discussion of all the clauses of the document, and we have reached full consensus in most parts of it. God willing, tomorrow you will hear good news regarding the end of this negotiation in the way we will manage to establish the civil government over the next few days.
In the deal that was signed in early July, the transitional government will be in place for 3 years and be replaced by a fully civilian government. As parties get down to find the details of the agreement, many in Sudan are hoping that this ushers in a new dawn, one that will guarantee the nation peace and stability. Sudan has been a fluid state since the ouster of former President Omar Hassan al-Bashir. Michael Karanja, CGTN.
Well, for more on this developing story, we are now joined by CGTN's Adel El Mahrouhi in Cairo and Giram Chala, who is in Addis Ababa for us. Let's start with you, Adel. Sudan's military council and the main opposition coalition have reached an agreement, as we've been hearing there. What is the mood like in Sudan, and what does this agreement mean?
It's a celebrative mood in Sudan. Protesters have taken the streets in a very wide and big sign of celebrations, even before the final announcement of the agreement over the constitutional declaration comes. There has been a concern that the tension that has been ongoing, the clashes that Sudan has been seeing in recent weeks could affect the reach for a unanimous and agreed upon vision for the country. The constitutional declaration is basically an agreement between the Freedom and Change Coalition and the Military Council to draft sort of a guiding constitution that will be the main guideline, the main legislative authority taken from to guide and motivate the rest of the public sectors to move along with the agreed upon plan. So there has been an initial agreement, and the details of which have been kind of leaked, but the final announcement and the signature over the agreement will take place on Sunday as scheduled and as announced by the Freedom and Change members, who have been just releasing some details about the agreement itself just about a few minutes ago.
Okay, Adel, now over to you, Giram, in Addis Ababa. The African Union has played a critical role in the negotiations. What is the reaction from Addis on this agreement?
So the African Union has congratulated all sides, including the Transitional Military Council, the opposition and everyone else part of this agreement. They said that this transition is going to help Sudan to gain peace and also avoid chaotic situation that could loom into the country. The AU is particularly excited because this has been an African problem which was solved by an African solution. The chairperson, especially envoy himself, Mohamed Labat, and the Prime Minister of Ethiopia's envoy, Mohamed Dirir, themselves were working around the clock to help the parties in Sudan to strike this deal. And now a civilian leadership is going to be expected in the country, and then a democratic transition could also be seen out of this agreement. So they called it victory here at the African Union.
And back to you, Adel. How precisely will this agreement help resolve the crisis in Sudan, would you say?
Well, first of all, it designs the platform of the transitional bodies. So there will be a sovereign council, which is the main council that will be leading Sudan through the coming 39 months. It is made out of 11 members. 6 of them are going to be civilian, 5 military, 5 civilian, and a chair to that council. Now, the military is going to chair this sovereign council for the coming about 20 months, and therefore it will have sort of the upper hand in the situation. Still, this council needs 2/3 of the voters to agree on any issue that relates to the country. A cabinet should also be formed according to that, which will be the executive authority that will take over in the country itself, and a legislative body. Now, the key issue that will resolve any kind of conflict is that the military is now responsible for all armed bodies. So the rapid intervention force, which is a paramilitary group, will be under the authority of the military, the police as well. The ministers of defense and interior will be appointed by the military council, while the prime minister will be selected by the civil opposition groups. And the military, along with the armed bodies, the security bodies, will not follow or be under the umbrella of the cabinet. They will be under the umbrella of the sovereign council. So it saves sort of the regulations, and also it gives every party what they want. The military wants a semi-independence, which it will gain at first. And at the same time, the cabinet will be formed by civilian recommendations. All its members will be recommended by the civilian authority. And finally, which is also crucial, is that once this body is formed, the Military Transitional Council will be dissolved, and these will be the only official and legitimate bodies in Sudan.
Okay, thank you, Adel. Now, finally, back to you, Giram. Could you explain to us what would be the next steps and what role that the African Union will continue to play?
So the next step, Karen, is the most important step now for Sudanese parties, for the country itself and for the region, and the efforts of the African Union to be seen on the ground. They need to implement it, and the momentum that we've seen of excitement and celebrations are expected to be converted into an energy to implement what has been written on that agreement. The African Union in this regard has been saying that we've seen in the region, for example in South Sudan, agreements being signed and a lack of implementation, how it's dragging processes into unnecessary levels and creating more chaos, humanitarian situations at the same time. So the AU wants to see everyone involved in this process to be proactive, to see the implementation with the given amount of time. Few months are given, as you heard it from a previous story, to implement this agreement on the ground, with the elections coming up at the same time. So everybody is expecting that implementation to happen as soon as possible. The AU said it will be there for them to support and provide any technical assistance necessary. The Ethiopian government, through the Prime Minister himself, said that they will be part and parcel of the process by allowing the Sudanese parties to exercise the utmost democracy and the law that they have under their disposal. IGAD, at the same time, the regional community, through its member states, are also proactive in this process. So everybody here involved in the process expects the implementation, the fruitful implementation of the agreement signed in Sudan, Karen, and we hope that that is going to be the case and as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Giram Chala there in Addis Ababa. And earlier, of course, we spoke to CGTN's Adel El Mahrouhi in Cairo on the agreement that's been reached now on the document, which will usher in a period of transitional agreement in Sudan. Moving on to other news now, Nigeria. The military says no less than 9 Boko Haram terrorists have been killed in 3 separate operations. They also recovered several weapons from the insurgents. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
The military onslaught against the terrorists occurred in Benishek, a settlement about 70 kilometers west of Maiduguri, the state capital. Although the Islamic State had claimed that fighters in its West African province had killed 25 soldiers in a military base there, burnt the base and catered away with weapons, but military sources say they repelled the attack with airstrikes, killing 3 of the terrorists. Other encounters occurred in Mainok and Jakana, both towns notorious for Boko Haram attacks. Military troops waylaid terrorists who were attempting to carry food supplies to their base. 6 of the insurgents were killed in a gun battle and weapons recovered. The military has constantly said the terrorists are on a back foot, but they continue to stage coordinated attacks on military bases and civilian targets. The northeast region has suffered a major setback following Boko Haram's decade-long insurgency. Their campaign to establish an Islamic caliphate has led to the death of tens of thousands and displacement of millions from their homes. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now to our continuing coverage of the Ebola situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's now 1 year since the outbreak was reported in eastern Congo. Now the disease is causing panic in neighbouring Rwanda, as it has now emerged that 2 more cases have been reported in the densely populated city of Goma. However, the man in charge of Ebola response in the Great Lakes nation insists that closing borders is not a wise move. Here's more on that.
The Democratic Republic of Congo marked a year since Ebola made a landfall in the eastern North Kivu and Ituri provinces. And with it, more bad news for the eastern big city of Goma, which also happens to be the capital of North Kivu. 2 more cases were reported. This time, the wife and child of a man who died of Ebola are the latest on the growing list of Ebola infections.
I believe that measures are being taken to ensure that the infection is truly contained in the home where this outbreak occurred. The victim's wife and child are now hospitalized at the Ebola treatment center in Goma, and their health is no longer a concern.
The closure and reopening of a shared border by Rwanda has pushed up the stakes in the region, even as the man in charge of combating Ebola in DRC warns against the move.
The way people cross borders does not guarantee the best control yet. We need to strengthen our control at the border post we just visited. Also, see what Rwanda is doing on the other side and modernize the way we control people who cross the border into Rwanda.
Goma is a jewel city of eastern DRC. It lies adjacent to Rwanda's Gisenyi city. It is also a hub of the region, with residents sharing ethnic, economic and social ties with their Rwandese counterparts. People of the 2 cities depend entirely on the state of open borders. Some work, some have homes and even place their children in schools on either side of the border. The city has been the center of political and historical events that have shaped the 2 nations. The genocide in Rwanda, the First and Second Congo Wars, together with the deadly cholera outbreak, were felt reverberated in the 2 nations. Now, a deadly viral outbreak is the latest potent threat to the 2 countries, and Goma sits at the center of this.
One of the recommendations is to ask neighboring countries not to close their borders so as to hinder the movement of people and goods, and that was clear. I think our minister and government reacted, and immediately after, the border was reopened.
Although largely peaceful, Goma is the latest victim of Ebola, which has been riding on instability in eastern DRC. militia action, a population that doesn't trust foreign medical teams, and a poor infrastructure have been a catalyst of the rapid spread of Ebola in the region.
The biggest problem is insecurity. Those responsible for the country's security will be part of this multi-sectoral committee. So, by putting all our energies together, there will be a synergy to quickly stop this epidemic.
Kampala is also on the edge, as Ebola spreads in Ituri province, which shares a border with Uganda. The Ebola situation in eastern Congo is the second worst, after the 2014 to 2016 case in West Africa, in which 11,000 people died. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
To Libya now, and commander of the LNA forces, Khalifa Haftar, is in Cairo. The Eastern government-backed general returns to the Egyptian capital to continue his logistical cooperation with Egypt on what both parties dubbed a war on terrorist groups in Libya. Haftar enjoys huge support from Cairo. Here's Adel El-Mahrouhi with more.
It's the third visit from the commander of the LNA forces, Khalifa Haftar, since he began his military campaign against Tripoli. The Libyan general is in the middle of a civil war against Libyan militias that support his rival Faiz al-Sarraj, the head of the UN-backed government of national accord. Haftar's delegation are set to discuss the latest development in the war over Tripoli. He's scheduled to meet Egyptian intelligence and military officials. Cairo is one of the region's biggest supporters to the LNA forces' war against the militias. So far, the Egyptian president has held talks with Haftar twice since the April campaign began. To Egypt, having a unified military forces is vital in Libya to maintain security and control over the mutual border of the two North African nations. Egypt also fears the rise of Islamists to power in Libya. Haftar's visit comes as the war over Tripoli intensifies, and after the UN Libya envoy Ghassan Salama has called for a ceasefire next week as the Muslim world marks Eid al-Adha, the biggest Islamic feast. Adel El-Mahrouhi, CGTN, Cairo.
At least 5 people have died after flash flooding hit Sierra Leone's capital on Friday amid torrential rains. Serious damage was reported in the West African port city of more than 1 million people as homes and vehicles were swamped. More rain was expected as some residents feared possible mudslides similar to those that devastated parts of Freetown 2 years ago. Flooding and mudslides in 2017 killed nearly 500 people, with even more reported missing. At the time, critics accused the government of not learning from past disasters in a city where many of the poor have erected housing at precarious sites and with a lack of good drainage. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including China calls for speedy implementation of South Sudan peace deal. And Ethiopia's PM Abiy Ahmed frees coup attempt suspects after investigations.
As conflict, poverty and corruption consume many African countries, their impacts continue to be felt far and wide. Since 2014, more than 1.8 million refugees and migrants have arrived on European shores. While some seek refuge, others hope for opportunities. Sicily is on the front line of Italy's migrant crisis. With tensions growing, we'll discover what the reality is like for those starting a new life and how the locals feel about having to share their home.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
China is urging parties to South Sudan's peace deal to speed up implementation of the agreement and to end the conflict in the country. This comes 2 months to the November deadline for the formation of a unity government in the country. CGTN's Patrick Oyet now reports.
The South Sudan's peace deal dictates that a unity government comprising all the parties should be formed by November this year. Opposition leader Riek Machar and 4 others would become vice president in the new government. However, there is growing concern among members of the international community that the peace deal implementation is moving slower than expected.
We will continue to stand with the people of South Sudan through thick and thin. We will continue to support South Sudan's efforts in maintaining peace and stability and promoting economic and social development.
The peace deal provides for security sector reforms. The reforms require more than $290 million. The government says getting those funds remains one of the biggest challenges to the deal's implementation.
According to the schedule given when Dr. Riek asked for November, for 6 months, which will end in November, we hoped that the revitalized government of national unity is formed.
The warring parties have now ordered their forces to return to military camps away from populated areas.
Roads that were previously closed have opened. Violence have now reduced across the country. Many here hope that lasting peace could soon return, but if a unity government is not formed in November, some armed groups may resume fighting, which would put the current peace deal at a crossroads. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has said his government is undertaking activities to catch any remaining masterminds behind the June 22nd failed coup attempt. Ahmed, speaking to local and foreign media outlets, stressed that his government has so far arrested 350 suspects in connection with the coup attempt and is looking for more. 121 suspects were freed after investigations. CGTN's Giram Chala has more.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed began by reminding citizens that the June 22nd coup attempt was much more serious than people anticipated it. The incident resulted in the killings of the Amhara regional leadership and 2 army generals. Right after 355 suspects were arrested, and of those, 121 are already released.
We used a remarkable leadership skill when we were curbing this dangerous situation. Secondly, after the incident, we did not panic and kill or imprisoned people just because they were suspects. We have maintained calm and investigated before detaining. That is why only around 340 people were captured, and from these, 121 of them were freed. We have to work to avoid a repetition of such happenings.
After successfully brokering a peace deal in Sudan, Abiy has sent out a message to the parties too.
For the long-lasting peace in Sudan, those who say they are in the opposition or those who are leading the country, whether they are within Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti or even in Ethiopia, must find a common ground to continue as a nation.
On the Ethiopian economy, the Prime Minister promised a rapid economic growth will continue in the country. He said investment promotion will be given due attention.
The main attention of the government is the economy of Ethiopia. Recently, we have formed a national committee just like the one that executed the seedling planting, which is being led by the Prime Minister himself. The main duties of this committee is charging the investment landscape, increasing output, using the resources that we have to put irrigation, and within a few years we want to stop importing at least wheat, edible oil and sorghum for beer making. Apart from that, we will tighten our regulation works against those who artificially cause trade imbalances.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power a little over a year ago, and so far his multifaceted moves and reform agenda have garnered him international attention, praise and even awards. But he himself admits assuring the rule of law and nationwide peace and security remain top in his agenda. CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The UN Refugee Agency has welcomed Libya's announcement that it will be shutting down 3 of its detention centres for refugees, migrants and asylum seekers. Spokesperson Andrei Mahecic told reporters in Geneva that UNHCR was now calling for the orderly release of all refugees in detention centres in urban settings. Among the centres that are slated to be closed is one in Tajura in northwestern Libya that came under missile attack in July this year, leaving about 50 people dead and over 130 severely injured. The attack was strongly condemned by UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet, who stated that it could amount to a war crime. The detention centres in Misrata and Homs will also close. UNHCR does not yet have details regarding the relocation of the people held in the 3 centres. There are 19 official detention centres under control of Libyan authorities, holding a total of some 5,000 refugees and migrants.
With regard to the closure of the 3 detention centres in Libya, we obviously welcome that initiative of shutting down those centres that include also Tajura detention centre that was hit, if you recall, in early July by an airstrike. What we are calling on now is for an orderly release of all refugees in detention centres to urban settings, and we stand ready to provide these people with assistance through our urban programs, that would include some form of financial assistance, medical and psychosocial support. It has been our long-standing advocacy to close the detention centres in Libya holding refugees, asylum seekers and migrants. Asylum seekers and refugees should not be kept in detention. We absolutely oppose any idea of detaining children whether they are refugees or asylum seekers or migrants.
Let's now head to Ethiopia, where China has donated foodstuffs worth over $7.2 million as part of efforts to fight hunger in the Horn of Africa nation. The donation includes over 13 metric tons of wheat and rice, which was handed over to the Ethiopian National Disaster Management Authority. The World Food Programme says over 8.3 million Ethiopians are in need of urgent humanitarian aid. Internal displacement and climate-related disasters have led to serious food challenges in some parts of Ethiopia.
Another Chinese saying goes that sharing fishing techniques is more important than sharing the fish. So let's share the knowledge on how to fish. I wish to say that as your friend indeed, China will, in addition to providing food aid, further expand agricultural cooperation with Ethiopia.
The immediate assistance from the People's Republic of China is very timely and increasing in amount through time. This shows that the People's Republic of China is so committed to support Ethiopia, not only in development areas, but also in humanitarian intervention.
Cancer prevention and cancer treatment are the main objectives of a health caravan in Tunisia. Doctors and medical staff travel to remote areas to provide free treatment and breast cancer screening. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi brings us that report.
Tunisia is marking the Breast Cancer Awareness Week. Dozens of doctors have volunteered to increase support for the awareness, early detection and treatment, as well as palliative care of this disease, which is killing more and more Tunisian women.
The national project targets 500,000 women. We will provide early detection cancer screening to 26,000 women in Ariana Governorate.
A health caravan is traveling to 24 regions across Tunisia to inform the poor and the needy rural women about cancer risk.
Many women ignore the risk of breast cancer. Early detection and diagnosis reduces the risks and makes the disease easier to treat.
Over 200 women visited the hospital. Many patients say that talking openly with doctors is one of the best ways to feel good about the breast cancer treatment decisions.
I was terrified because I had some alarming symptoms, but doctors said the test was negative. I encourage women to visit the caravan to stop the scourge of breast cancer.
2 women were diagnosed with breast cancer on the first day of the Solidarity Caravan. The Ministry of Health aims to enhance patient care and broaden prevention.
According to specialists, breast cancer is by far the most common cancer in women worldwide. The Ministry of Health in Tunisia will launch a campaign at universities during the next academic year to raise awareness of cancer symptoms. Adan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
We've got all the business news coming up for you after the break, including foreigners begin betting on enterprises in Ethiopia. And Zimbabwe's worsening electricity shortages force many to work at night.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Ethiopia's private investment performance has been weak for a long time, partly because the Ethiopians are yet to fully understand it. But now things are changing. Foreign firms in one of Africa's fastest growing economies are accommodating the risk of doing business in the hope of longer term benefits. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoe reports.
Isaias Lema presented his mango juice production proposal to a private equity firm about 3 years ago. After a review, the firm bought in and injected $500,000 to help him get started. 6 months ago, he opened up shop.
We've set an annual plan to produce about, this year, first year, to produce about 7 million in one shift. But in the second year, we plan to do double shift and increase our capacity by double that. So we can go about 15 to 18 million bottles a year.
Isaias says depending on loans from commercial banks was costly because of the expensive collateral they demanded. Opting for private equity has been an easier route since the foreign firm assists him to grow faster so that it can get back its investment sooner.
When they invest in you, it's not just a gift or anything. So they're taking a risk on believing on you, so you need to deliver on that promise as well. So the main thing for me is that you need to have a very good agreement or a contract. Your contract is basically where anything can happen.
Most small businesses in Ethiopia are family owned, so it is often hard for them to conform to the requirements of foreign firms. Repatriation of profits due to currency convertibility issues and foreign currency shortages are further hurdles foreign private equity firms face in Ethiopia. But despite this, Renew Strategies, the foreign firm that has invested in Isaias' company, says Ethiopia remains an attractive investment spot.
You don't have to have some brand new innovative technology like you would maybe in the United States, where Silicon Valley is where all the innovation really is coming out of. Here, the market is virgin. You can just do something really well and grow it. And so the risk that we often are talking about at the company level is execution risk. Can the management team translate that idea into an actual company and scale it up?
But there are misconceptions about how private equity runs. Some entrepreneurs think the firms will run the businesses permanently.
Private equity firms are businesses. They're in the business of putting $1 in and getting $3 out 5 years later. And they have to find the best companies to do that. Where often entrepreneurs get confused is they're like, well, why are we exiting? Why are we trying to sell our position? Well, because that's how the capital market flows.
The Ethiopian government is now working on relaxing investment bureaucracies so that more foreign companies can inject capital here. The country looks at private equity as a valuable source for foreign exchange through foreign funds that are injected in businesses as capital, as well as export revenue generation and import substitution. And those like Isaias that have already had help starting up are keen to stick to professional management and production so that they can stand the test of international competition. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Gauteng is threatened by a high population growth rate despite its high contribution to South Africa's economy. The province has contributed 35% to GDP since 2014. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela takes up the story.
Gauteng's economy is developing at a slower pace than the population. This creates a disproportionate burden on the economic infrastructure and basic services, and more critically, on the capacity of the economy to absorb higher numbers of people into gainful economic opportunities. This is according to the Gauteng Executive Council for Economic Development. The assertion comes just after the Stats SA revealed that Gauteng, at 15.2 million, is the province with the largest share of the country's population. The Gauteng province is a very popular destination for people seeking a better life and better jobs. And those people often come from the rest of the South African provinces and the rest of the continent. The pace of population growth has become detrimental on economic development. This revelation about Gauteng also comes on the back of the announcement that South Africa's unemployment rate continues to increase.
It's not just government's problem, it's all of our problems, and we need to put our shoulders to the wheel to have the hard discussions, to make the hard trade-offs, to get into the nitty-gritty of the tough decisions we need to take as a country.
The labor sector is now worried, but cautions against panic.
We're asking ourselves whether we're not going to the road to IMF, and the conclusion that we made that we're not there yet. We are positive that all the problems that are identified are not insurmountable, are within our reach, and we can be able to make progress in dealing with those issues.
As for the economic hub, Gauteng, the Executive Council for Economic Development has undertaken to make deliberate efforts to place the economy of the province on a sustainable path of growth. Those efforts will include ensuring that small, medium and micro-sized enterprises, or SMMEs, are fully integrated in the formal economic sector. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Zimbabwe's worsening electricity shortages have effectively turned night into day for many businesses and families. Most of the work is happening after dark when lights are restored for a few hours.
It's just after 9 p.m. and Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, is just roaring into life. Rolling power blackouts have meant that most economic activity must wait for power to be restored after a day-long outage.
It is a very tough time indeed, because we're having to only operate during the night where there's availability of power. Our factory here consumes a lot of electricity, and with the challenges that the country is facing at the current moment of lack of electricity and some serious load shedding, long hours, we are forced to do our production in the evenings.
Before the power cuts, the plant produced about 20,000 bags of wall plaster a month. Now, production has dropped to below 7,000 bags.
Running a plant of this magnitude on diesel, an expensive fuel commodity, it definitely means I'm going to be forced to put up my price. But the fact that the general consumer as well is probably also suffering the same predicament. The product ends up being costly and they won't be able to afford it.
For families, it is much the same. Cynthia Chabuino, a mother of 4 young children, must squeeze in a lot of her household chores within the few hours of light.
This is a huge strain. Power comes late in the night when I'm supposed to be sleeping and resting, but I have to wake up and do household chores like fetching water and ironing. It's unbearable.
Because of these power outages, we have since changed our way of life. For example, we basically need water. For us to get this water, I perform a daily routine whereby the moment that we receive the electricity back, they say at 11 p.m. At 11 p.m., the moment we receive that electricity back, I have to rush, and open for these people so that they are able to access water.
The nights have now become our daytime because that's when we are awake and doing things that we previously did during the day.
The southern African country is producing just half of its 1,700 megawatt peak demand as a result of a prolonged drought that has reduced output at its largest hydroelectric plant. Aging coal-fired generators also keep breaking down, according to state-owned power utilities Zesa Holdings. The company has imposed rolling blackouts that last up to 18 hours a day, crippling factories and mines and compounding the country's worst economic crisis in a decade. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
After the break. Year of Return seeks to encourage diaspora Ghanaians back home.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Ghana is marking what it calls the Year of Return, urging Africans in the diaspora to come home. It coincides with the commemoration of more than 400 years since the first Africans were sent to America as slaves. The non-profit organization, the Heritage and Cultural Society of Africa, is set to hold an international summit to discuss the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade next week. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai sat down with its founder, Johanna Svanikie, Ghana's former ambassador to France and Portugal, and asked her why Africans in the diaspora should consider returning home.
Africa is now reaching out to its diaspora, telling its diaspora to come home and engage in the development of Africa. So this is a platform for people to connect. They can connect on every level, on a business level, on a social level, on academic level, on intellectual level.
400 years after the slave trade, what has been the impact on Africans and those in the diaspora?
If you look abroad, until now, African Americans are suffering from discrimination in the US, and particularly African American males are being killed for no reason at all because of this legacy. So the effects can still be felt till today. And unfortunately, after 400 years, there are still some major challenges as far as the communities are involved. And that is why we've asked to bring communities together.
2019 has been declared as the year of return by Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo. What does the summit seek to do in terms of bringing more Africans from the diaspora to settle here in Ghana?
Our government has already taken steps to try and remove visa controls over Africans in the diaspora. So the former government, I think, made all Africans can come to Ghana without a visa, subject to certain conditions. And more recently, Jamaicans were told that it would be put into effect that they could also come. And I think this will build up and continue. So definitely the visa controls are very much something which should be dealt with. We are saying that there's this Aladdin's cave, there's this magical place, there's this place full of friends and family and joy and culture and laughter and experiences waiting for you. So come and have your experience of Africa in Ghana.
Meanwhile, celebrated Ghanaian artist Kwame Akoto-Bamfo says he intends to start a dialogue on slavery to commemorate hundreds of years of trauma. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar has more.
Ghanaian artist Kwame Akoto-Bamfo has been sculpting hundreds of faces representing the men and women who fell victim to slavery. The celebrated artist has placed the sculptures in Darfur, which was a major slave market in the 19th century. He says his work is borrowed from the ancient Akan tradition and hopes to keep Darfur's history alive by highlighting what happened here.
What I hope to do is to capture an experience and let this art trigger a dialogue about who we are as an African people, who we were before, and then where we are going, especially with something like the transatlantic slave trade and the sub-Saharan slave trade and racism having happened as a result, you know, of this atrocity. So there isn't really a direct message. It's not about my message to the world, but it's about some discussions that we need to have.
The sculpted portraits are the enslaved African section, portraying specific expressions and traits. Akoto-Bamfo, however, prefers to use random models from all over Africa due to the prevalence of slavery trade in the continent.
Previously, I will pick a particular model based on the looks and what I have in my head and then what I want to portray. But then over the years, to cut down on the idealism that in the work, in the narrative, and then in the people being portrayed, I will just model anybody who comes around so that we will have enough representation of Africans who were enslaved cast across the world, either than just focusing on Ghanaians, on West Africans in general. So
Akoto-Bamfo believes the best way to remember the ancestors is to respect their descendants.
I think that the best way to celebrate these 400 years is to look at what these people, to honor the dreams of these people that we've lost, and the dreams being that they were human beings, they had rights, and their descendants should continue to have rights and be considered part of the citizens of the world.
His project began in 2010. He is currently working on several new pieces for museums in the United States. One of his pieces already stands in the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Alabama. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Sports news after the break, including women in South Africa embrace one of the oldest sports in the world, judo.
Africa, where champions are made, records